North Yorkshire has gone from a different model really, from borough councils and a county council and a York City Council. So we've now got one North Yorkshire Council and we've got York City Council. What particular changes and benefits has that given then to the county?
Well, it's the biggest change in local government locally since 1974, so 50 years. And within that 50 years, we've also had a relatively minor change where York at one time was part of the county council, and then that was separated out and York became its own unitary council in 1994. But this biggest change has come about where we used to have 7 district and borough councils and 1 county council, and now we only have a single unitary council on the old county council boundaries. But the county council has disappeared as well, although all the services that were being delivered by the 2 tiers, as it was called, all those services are still being delivered, but now they're being delivered by a single unitary council. And although that's the biggest change locally, it's not revolutionary. By far the majority of people in this country of England actually live under unitary local government.
And I know that was a change you supported, but it was given us a no option change really, wasn't it, by ministers?
Well, when we started down this route, and the whole reason why we started this, is that there's a holy grail in local government, and it's called devolution. And it's this idea about moving decision making away from Whitehall and bringing it to, in our case, County Hall, and in the case of York, the Guildhall. So that is the process. And I've never known a councillor yet who hasn't said in the 30 odd years that I've been in local government that we could make a better decision locally rather than leaving it to civil servants in Whitehall. That's not to say that civil servants make bad decisions, it's just that we've always thought that the more local you can make the decision making, the better that decision making can be.
So where we are at the moment then, we've all the borough councils have kind of merged in with what was county council, I suppose, and York City Council has remained as is. But we've got, and that's a local, is that termed local government reorganisation? But is the sort of the step on from that then, is that the devolution and the levelling up?
Yes, I mean, as I said, the holy grail is that devolution, and what I didn't complete in that sort of context was that as we were negotiating the devolution deal with ministers, we got to a point where there was a request that we did local government reorganisation, because there's no doubt that the 2-tier system is less efficient, and because it's less efficient, it's more costly. So there was a request to consider it. We went to a meeting with a minister, and the request was no longer a request, it was a requirement. So we had to do it. And I mean, I've always been a supporter of doing it, but it became a requirement for the devolution deal. And the devolution deal is so important to us because of that thing about moving decision making and other funding that comes with it. And no doubt we'll talk about that in a moment. But it was so important that we had to do it to get that devolution deal.
So really it was kind of the other way round really from what I've talked about, isn't it? So it was the restructuring was needed to get to the devolution.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly. And of course then if we move on to consider the devolution deal, as I say, it's about moving decision making, and that in itself is very important. You know, so we will get control of various budgets that the government spends, and we will spend it in the way that we think is best locally. But also there is new money that comes along with it, and we've already had some of that new money, even though we've only just set up the combined authority that goes with devolution. We've just set that up, but we've already spent some money on brownfield sites for housing, and on some net zero carbon targets, and get some actions to actually deliver on those targets. And the big amount of money that people tend to focus on is the money that comes over a 30-year period, £18 million a year, which is what they call unfettered money, and it is entirely up to what the combined authority, which of course includes a mayor as well, and that's another requisite of devolution. If you want to get the most money, you have to have an elected mayor. So the combined authority, chaired by the elected mayor, will be able to spend that 18 million a year, which I know some people say, well, that doesn't sound an awful lot, but if you think about it over 30 years, it's £500 million. And I think £500 million is a lot of money.
And when you look at the sort of scope and responsibilities then of the combined authority and the mayor, I know that's something that you put together with the leader of York City Council. How did you go about doing that? Because it's a tremendously, that's in a way it's the core of what the combined authority will do. And I know there's sort of some sort of significant parts on it, like policing, and you talk a lot about carbon reduction. How did you go about putting that together? Well, it's an important document, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a model to follow, so it's not completely new. We already have combined authorities around the country, and you look at some of the very big ones like Andy Street in Birmingham and the Midlands, Andy Burnham in Manchester, Ben Houchen. And Ben Houchen has been very much a model for us to look at because he's in the Tees Valley, which is a smaller geographic area, and he's also a Conservative mayor working with a Conservative government. And at the moment, it's a Conservative government, and speaking from where I am sitting, I hope it's going to be a Conservative mayor going forward. But there's a model to follow, but I must also recognise the amount of work that was done by our professional officers. In a way, my role was quite easy because I just had to talk to other politicians at times, but our officers had to go and negotiate with the civil service. And the civil service, because what they're doing with devolution is giving up some of their powers, they are very, I won't say that they're reluctant to do it, resistant to it, but they want to make darn sure that if they're giving up those powers, they're giving it up to people who know how to manage the situation and also come up with some good ideas about how to do things differently in York and North Yorkshire. So it was very much the officers who led on those negotiations, and we, the politicians locally, were just supporting what they did and gave them feedback about, well, yes, that's a power that we would like to have, or no, that's not a power. I mean, for instance, we could have negotiated to take over parts of the health service. And even Andy Burnham in Manchester, I think, has actually turned that down as a power that he perhaps doesn't want to have at the moment.
And was there a lot on the table then that could have been negotiated, or is it, have we got like the kind of, if you like, the base model that, like a lot of other areas sort of started with the possibility of extending the roles of the combined authority?
I think we probably have got the base model, because that's what everybody starts out with.
Yeah.
I think what we've got within that base model is the quantum that goes with it. So I think, for instance, our gain share per head of population is a good deal. The brownfield money is a good deal. Some of the net zero carbon stuff is a good deal. I think we have negotiated, compared to other negotiations around the country, I think we have negotiated a good deal.
And then
But to be honest, Tim, what I should say is, even if we'd negotiated a less than good deal, and I'm not going to say a bad deal, I would still have signed up to it, because devolution is a process. This isn't the end of the thing. This is the start of it. And it's like a ladder, and we've got our feet now on the first rung of the ladder.
Yeah.
And I think people like Andy Burnham and Ben Houchen are probably on to Devo deal number 20 by now, because they keep going back to government to say, we can do something else. Give us the powers to do this now. Give us some extra funding to do that.
And then, so just talking about the main areas of responsibility, because I think there is I think a lot of people don't fully understand it, and I think that's in part because I guess with politics there's some that are really interested in it and some that are just not. But the reality is this will all affect everyone's day-to-day life, so they should be paying attention to it. Yeah. So in terms of the main kind of areas of responsibility then, so the mayor, along with a deputy mayor, will pick up the roles of the police, fire and crime commissioner. So that's the sort of scrutiny of the police and fire. And that's kind of to my thinking, that seems a sort of separate area to the levelling up. But I suppose it's still, again, sort of going for budgets, and it needs to sort of convince, if you say, like central government, of how it works.
Yeah. Well, excuse me. A lot of these initiatives are actually cross-cutting, and they're not necessarily separate. They may come from different parts of the box, but they're all working together. The big change, of course, is having an elected mayor, and that elected mayor chairs the combined authority. But the way that the combined authority works, it's all about consensus, but we do need a figurehead, and we need that figurehead to actually be able to go and negotiate further deals with government. We have negotiated this first deal, and it's quite a wide-ranging one. From now on, the mayor will be the person who will go to government and negotiate for something else. And it's about strategy and strategic issues rather than the day-to-day stuff. The two councils still stay as the two councils. The two councils still do the things that councils do. But coming together as the combined authority, we look at, I suppose, what you could call the bigger picture. So we will get more money to do something strategic with a road network or other parts of the transport network, but then that will be devolved to the councils to actually deliver it. So, for instance, if our highest priority, and I'm not saying it's going to be this, but if our highest priority was about the state of the roads and we wanted to put more money into mending potholes, the combined authority could get that more money, but it would then give it to North Yorkshire and to York to actually go and fill the potholes. The mayor and the combined authority will have a number of people working for them, but they will not have huge teams of people to go out and deliver the projects. That's what the councils will do. And there are some things that the councils will continue to do, which are only the council business and are not the business of the combined authority.
And when you use the word consensus then, that seems a really key point, because I think particularly London, let's name it, I think there's a lot of concern from many quarters with what's going on in London and the level of consensus. How would a North Yorkshire mayor develop that level of consensus? Would he be really part of, like talking to yourself, York City Council, amongst the communities? How would he, how would he sort of develop that consensus?
Could be a she as well.
Sorry,
she,
yeah, sorry.
There is one female candidate.
Thank you, yeah.
Yes, I mean, you would hope that he or she will actually be building those links now when they're actually candidates, and then coming forward with their manifesto about what they want to see happen, and what they've got a mandate if they are elected to see happen, because they've put it in their manifesto. And we have to encourage people to come out and vote for this, because this is a pretty important election. I read in the newspaper the other day, and I put it into my council statement, over half the world's population will go to a significant election this year. And that's the first time that's ever happened. Well, we might have two significant elections in North Yorkshire. We may well have a general election this year, and I think that's more than likely. But we will definitely have a mayoral election in May. And it is important that people get out and vote, because this is a very important role.
But just to try and, I think one of the things is that I think people don't fully understand what the mayor will do. And I know some people, I think most people when they've seen a mayor in the past, it's been chains and it's been possibly like a community event. But I think it absolutely needs stressing that this is such a different, it's almost like just the same name, but in a massively different role. So just to understand, I mentioned about the policing and fire and picking up the sort of the crime commissioner role. The other parts of the responsibility then around the economy. But the sort of key point is around it all is the levelling up of the communities, of the economies, isn't it? I mean, not the communities.
Yeah.
So the difference is with possibly what's being offered to more London and the south, making sure that North Yorkshire gets the same opportunities and funding. Is that the right thinking?
I think that's a very good description of it. And again, using Ben Houchin as a role model, if you look at what Ben's done to the economy of Teesside, you can see the clear amount of investment that's gone in and activity that's gone in because of his role. And I think, you know, as that American president said, it's the economy stupid. I mean, nearly everything revolves around the economy. If you have a strong economy, you can do a lot of things socially and for the rest of society. So I think the mayor's role is very much about the economy, but there are parts of the economy like housing and transport that will then become the responsibility of the mayor chairing the combined authority. But as I say, at a strategic level, not at the operational level. So I think we will see how that develops. But the consensus idea is that the mayor can't do anything without the support of the two councils. And equally, each council sitting on the combined authority can't do anything without the support of the other council and the mayor. You know, so it is heavily weighted towards actually having grown-up conversations and coming to grown-up decisions. And if you look at the relationship between the two councils, you know, I lead a Conservative-led council and Claire Douglas leads a Labour-led council. And I've no doubt that when the election comes about at the start of May, we will be very tribal and we'll be out there supporting our candidate and trying to get our candidate elected. And it may well be our candidate that's elected between Conservative or Labour, or it may be the Lib Dem, or it may be an independent, you know, or a Green. Who knows? That will be up to the people. And I keep going back to this thing, we need to encourage the people to get out and express their preference. But even now, we are working together, and I don't look at Claire and say, oh, she's the Labour leader of York. I look at Claire and say, she's the leader of York. And York is 220,000 people out of this jigsaw of North Yorkshire and York. And so, you know, we work together and we will continue to work together, although we may just have a little bit of a tribal relationship for a few weeks in April.
So it's a role then that's much more cross-party than, you know, maybe other roles. So, you know, whereas I think a local MP, most people either vote for personality or party. But I think this is my kind of take on it. Roles like the PFCC and the mayor is a little bit obviously still attached to a political party at times, but a little bit kind of more independent than certain roles like an MP.
Yeah, I remember going to a talk by William Hague not long after he'd been elected the MP for Richmond in that by-election where he was almost not elected as the MP for Richmond, and William became a very close friend after that. But in this talk that he gave to Northallerton Round Table, I think it was, he said, I stood as a Conservative candidate. I was elected as a Conservative MP, but my role is to represent all the people, whether they elected me or not. And I've always believed that, you know, you have the tribalism at the election, you get the election out of the way, then you represent everybody. And that's what Claire and I will be doing with York and North Yorkshire. And it's what Keith Aspin, the Lib Dem leader, was doing before he stood down, but the Lib Dems lost that election and lost control of York.
So just to finish up then, we've seen a couple of by-elections where the turnout's been pretty poor. And, you know, I look at obviously with my news channel, I look at the pickup of news items, and I look at, if I'm honest, the other news items that are out there. And in a way, I think it's shown that there's not a huge amount of interest just at the moment. I think it will soon pick up a pace as we get nearer the voting kind of time. But why? I know you've touched on this. Why should people vote? What's the kind of headline of why people should pay a bit of attention, and they don't need to put much time to it to look between the candidates. There's plenty out there already. Why should they get themselves out to vote?
Yeah. And there is a leaflet coming out from central government, which the candidates have to pay a contribution towards. But there is a leaflet coming out, so every voter will receive this leaflet through their letterbox, and it will set out who the candidates are and briefly what their proposals are, their manifestos. So I think everybody will have an availability of knowledge about who the candidates are and what they're proposing to do. Unfortunately, with local elections, you sometimes get interference from central issues. You know, things that happen in Westminster reflect on us, and therefore people become disenchanted or actually want to vote against us. And, you know, we notice that on the doorstep when we're out knocking on doors for our elections at local level. And we keep trying to say to people, yeah, but judge us on what we've been doing locally, not what's happening in Westminster, not what somebody's done, how somebody's misbehaved or whatever. But unfortunately, there is that colour. But it's hugely important, this election, because this is one of the most important political positions in York and North Yorkshire. I wouldn't say it's more important than leader of the councils, because we speak for the council, and the council does a huge amount. You know, we are a £1.5 billion business in North Yorkshire, so we do an awful lot of work for the people that we represent. But the mayor has a political role to play, which is an interface between the political system in North Yorkshire and the political system in Westminster. And it's important that we get the right person to work that interface. And I would see the mayor's role very much as being down in London, almost as much as they're being up here, and actually knocking on doors, talking to ministers, talking to civil servants, and getting more resources for York and North Yorkshire, which is the classic part of levelling up. You know, for too long we have seen resources flow into London and the south of England, because that's where the populations have been. And in politics, quite often, the louder the clamour, the more resources get directed in that direction. So now, with having mayors who have a very strong single voice, working with the two councils, with the two council leaders, that mayor has the opportunity to actually go and get more resources, more cash, more decision making for the people of York and North Yorkshire, and that must be better for our populations, the people that we serve. So I would say to them, get out and vote. And of course, I'm not allowed to say who they should vote for, but there might be a clear steer in any of the remarks I make.
Councillor Carl Les, thank you very much.